basically, South Sudan is defiant in the face of Sudan's threat to close oil pipelines through its territory. Sudan's accused Juba of arming rebels who are trying to topple the government in Khartoum and warned the South that it would lock down its oil export facilities. Juba denies backing insurgents and says that, for now, it is still pumping hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude over the border. Now, it claims not yet to have received any official notification from Sudan of any imminent closure of pipelines. Well, as things hot up, we're joined by Professor Eric Reeves. He specialises in Sudanese affairs at Smith College in the US. Professor, thanks for speaking to us. Now, does this standoff risk reigniting those hostilities that we've seen for so long between the South and Sudan? Because Khartoum's actually threatening more than just shutting down those pipelines, isn't it?
That's correct. I think we're closer to war than we have been at any time since secession by South Sudan. Among the agreements abrogated by Khartoum unilaterally were the security arrangements that were essential to demilitarize the border. In the absence of a demilitarized border between North and South, sooner or later there will be conflict.
OK, and a shutdown of this scale, though it's being threatened by Khartoum, just can't happen overnight. Sudan's saying it hasn't even heard, South Sudan is saying it hasn't had any official notification that this is actually on the cards.
It's quite possible that Khartoum means this as an act of sabotage, not simply an act of economic warfare, but an act of sabotage. These pipelines must be closed extremely carefully, and each well must be closed separately. And the oil content of paraffin is extremely high, meaning that you have to be very, very careful in how you shut it down to make sure that the pipeline can be flushed. If this is not done, then the infrastructure becomes valueless to both sides.
OK, now, Sudan also has a lot invested in South Sudan's oil resources. So we saw last year when Juba shut down production, both nations suffered. If Khartoum goes ahead with this, surely it risks shooting itself in the foot.
It does. And this highlights what many observers have noted for the last 2 years, and that is the increasing power of a coterie of generals within the regime who are much more militaristic, much more confrontational, and much more likely to play a game of economic chicken, where one side dares the other to drop out first. I fear that this, and especially the uncertainty with which the oil shutdown was announced, reflects this ongoing tension within the regime, which is going to be very, very dangerous if the generals prevail.
Now, this all hinges on Sudan's accusations that South Sudan is supporting rebels. South Sudan says it's got nothing to do with insurgents. How credible is that claim?
Not credible at all. I think it's what we need to note is that for the years now, 2 years that Khartoum has been accusing South Sudan of providing the Sudan People's Liberation Army North with weapons and military aid, they have not adduced a shred of evidence, not a single photograph, not a single interview, nothing. If they had it, they would show it. They don't have it, and so they are simply contriving this as an excuse.
Thanks very much. Professor Eric Reeves there joining us over the heating up tensions between South Sudan and Sudan. OK, moving on. In the Central African Republic, the country's military claims to have killed several rebels along the border with Cameroon. Now, the fighters belonged to a militia group that was a former ally of the Seleka former insurgent coalition that launched a coup in March. Its leader now runs the country, but has struggled to bring either security or stability there. Farouk Atig sent us this report from Bangui.
Since the coup in March, the rule of law in the Central African Republic has disintegrated even further. The leaders of the former Seleka rebel group struggle to control their fighters. Here, clerics and militia attend an emergency meeting. The imams of Bangui appeal for calm and hope for reconciliation. Christophe Gazambetti is one of the few Christians serving in the new government. The communications minister says he has a lot on his plate.
Listen, I do my work daily. If everything was perfect, they wouldn't need me. It's because there are problems that we're here.
After the ousting of François Bozizé, other rebel leaders who've recently become ministers say they're united behind the country's new leader.
There's only one president, and the other ones like me are following him. We followed the leader and we move forward, so there's no problem of lack of cohesion, I think.
Figurehead of a ghost state, the new president, Michel Djotodia, blames his predecessor's administration for the present chaos.
The former regime distributed more than 2,000 weapons in Bangui. Everybody knows that fact. The international community was there, everybody was there. But we didn't hear them say anything. There were also 4 containers of machetes.
Many Central Africans are now praying for the restoration of stability as soon as possible in their country.
All right, let's move now, Georgia, to Ivory Coast, because a youth leader from the former president, Laurent Gbagbo's political party, has been arrested. Tell us more about that.
Well, yeah, now Justin Koo has been arrested, but he's not been charged. He's actually spent a fortnight under arrest on Monday, under suspicion of having taken part in what's been called destabilizing activities, whatever they are. Now, he's a member of Laurent Gbagbo's Ivorian Popular Front. Gbagbo himself faces charges of crimes against humanity in The Hague over the bloody crisis that resulted from his refusal to accept election defeat at the end of 2010. Now, Koo's camp is saying that he is a victim of persecution by the current government. Take a listen.
They had no mandate to arrest him, and yet they came and took him away from our party's headquarters while he was in a work meeting, trying to change people's consciousness. It's what he's been doing for a month across the country. The aim is to ask Ivorians from all different parties to unite to defend the motherland. We believe that is the main reason why he was arrested. Another reason is the fact that judges at the International Criminal Court asked prosecutor Fatou Bensouda to produce stronger evidence. The regime wasn't expecting that. Justin Koo was also seen as someone who galvanizes the troops. We believe they arrested him for all these reasons.
All right. Now, Nelson Mandela still in hospital, still very poorly. He is 94 years old, and the country's very worried about their former leader, aren't they?
Yeah, now, he went into hospital on Saturday morning for a recurring lung infection that's seen him in and out of hospital a couple of times this year. Now, as you can understand, there was an outpouring of concern and well wishes over the weekend. The latest that we're hearing is that he is in a serious but stable condition. On Monday, his ex-wife Winnie and daughter Zinzi paid him a visit. Well, for more on his recovery, I'm joined from Cape Town by Aisha Ishmael. She has the latest on Nelson Mandela. Aisha, so as I was saying there, very tense weekend for fans of Mandela. Has much changed?
Good evening. Yes, what has happened so far is that there's only been one official communique from the South African government or from the presidency today, and that communique came at noon today, just saying that Nelson Mandela's condition remains unchanged, and with a plea from President Jacob Zuma for the nation to continue praying for the former president and for his family. Now, what we saw today outside the hospital in Pretoria was members of the Mandela family entering the hospital, but with no members of the ruling party or from government entering the hospital. Now, this could be that the family has asked for privacy, but we've also been told that the doctors need time and space to give Madiba the best possible treatment or the best treatment possible. Now, this has been a recurring problem. Nelson Mandela has been in and out of hospital 4 times in recent months. South Africans are concerned about this. There's been calls for them to pray, and right now South Africa is a nation in prayer. People are saying, what are we going to do without Nelson Mandela? He is our liberator, he is our unifier, he is the father of the nation. So it's as I said, South Africa is a nation at the moment in prayer, hoping for Nelson Mandela's recovery. I don't think that South Africans will ever be prepared for the day when it comes when Nelson Mandela is no longer around.
Thanks very much. Aisha Ishmael there for France 24 in Cape Town. Okay, a quick look at some other news now. After a weekend of negotiations in Ouagadougou, Burkinese mediators say that despite the mistrust between Mali's government and MNLA Tuareg rebels, there are still hopes that a peace agreement could be settled over the next day or so. Ethnic Tuaregs from the MNLA have refused to let the military into the northern city of Kidal, and heavy fighting between the two sides broke out in the region last week. That about wraps it up for now, but I will be back in about an hour with more.
Good stuff. Georgia, thank you very much indeed. Georgia Calvin-Smith there with all the top African news. Well, that wraps things up for this part of Live from Paris on France 24. Mark Cohen's up with you next with all the latest international headlines. Stay tuned.